What's up, guys? Welcome to the Weightlifting Scoop. Got an old face here. What's going on, James Tatum?
Yo, what's up, man?
Not
We're
much.
getting back in on the scoop.
Yeah, it's been a while. So, me and you really did this podcast for like the first few years. Like, me and you were on almost every single episode. So, it's good to be back. I live in Rhode Island now. You're still in the Fort Mill slash Charlotte area. So,
Mm-hmm.
we're not able to do the podcast in person anymore. But those were good times.
Oh yeah, that was a lot of fun. Yeah, in between training, get Glenn in there, Don. Yeah, we had all sorts of people.
Yeah, I mean, we'd always get somebody else from the team. We would always try to get someone to call in. We had, a lot of old school weightlifters. We had people like Cheryl Hayworth come in and watch training because obviously Don had coached her at some point. So there was always a connection somewhere and people visiting. And, you know, we do the podcast remotely. The vibe is never the same as like in person because when you have those microphones in the mixer, you can just talk and it's okay to kind of talk over people and the microphones collect all the voices correctly, whereas now if like you start talking over me it kind of sounds funny and is not the same type of vibe. So but anyways, what's new, man?
Yeah, man. Not too much. Still coaching weightlifting. I doing a lot of different things. Once I stopped being a weightlifter, I had all sorts of ideas of things that I wanted to do. And so, now I get the chance to kind of go after a bunch of stuff. But the biggest thing that I just finished is an addition on my house. That was pretty fun. 500 square feet. Uh, so
that
it was
was
a
that was really cool, man. I was checking out the photos. We don't get an opportunity to talk nearly as much as we used to, but you obviously follow people that you want to kind of see what they're up to. And me and you, we lived together for a couple years. And so I always like want you to do well and see what you're up to. So I was watching that. I was like, holy crap, that is impressive because that's not really something that I would be able to pull off. And my wife probably wishes that I could do something like that, but I would definitely not pull that off or even try. So when I saw the finished product, it's super nice, man. Like you did an awesome job, seriously.
Yeah, thanks, man. There was a lot of stuff that I didn't know how to do. So it was kind of, it took a lot longer because I'd have to, sit down and learn a new skill or something like that. But, doing the whole project from start to finish, you kind of learn the ins and outs. And it was pretty fun. I have a bigger respect for masons. I've got a hornet in here.
Yeah.
I must have not done that good a job in the house because the hornet's getting it. But yeah, so I had a lot of fun. Masons was hard, and you can't look too close when you're looking at my drywall because, yeah, they make it look easy when you watch them on YouTube, but man, it's hard to get it looking that good.
Yeah, well, I think if you go into anybody's house, if you really inspect it, when you look at things from a surface level, it's like when you're sitting at a Major League Baseball stadium in the upper deck and you're looking at the grass and you're like, it's absolutely beautiful, and then you go down onto the field and you realize there's a bunch of like, cleat marks and patches of grass missing. In your own house, you're always going to recognize those things on the field level. When you go to somebody else's house, you're going to see it from the upper deck level. So most people aren't going to be inspecting it that closely like you are because you know every square inch of that thing because you built it. So
Yeah, there might be a parallel with the weightlifting technique right there
yeah,
with that statement.
that's true. I think a lot of things in life for sure. But so do you still train at all, or are you just coaching mostly?
Yeah, mostly coaching. I just do some general stuff now. I had some nerve damage in 2019, like 2 weeks right before Pan Am's, and so I pulled out of Pan Am's in 2019, and ever since then, it was never quite the same. I still got up, not 19, 17, and then 19 was kind of like my last weightlifting competition. Um, but my shoulder was never quite the same. I think I hit like a 300 or something in 2019. So now I tried to do like a bunch of stuff. I tried to do some jujitsu and do some weightlifting, and it just didn't work out. Anytime I get into a front rack position, my left arm kind of goes numb on me. So I do some snatches, squats, and then spend a lot of time in the sauna.
Oh
It's about
yeah.
my
Do
training
do you
now.
have a sauna at your house, or do you just go to like a local gym or something?
I used to have an infrared sauna, and it just wasn't cutting it. Yeah, what's it get up to like 145 or something, and it just wasn't quite cutting it. So I got onto the YMCA, and they got one in there that gets up pretty hot. They got some people that come in there. I guess you're breaking the rules because they put a wet paper towel over the sensor because
Yeah.
their saunas only go up to like, 160. I think 160 is the law in South Carolina. The public saunas aren't supposed to go over that, which is not nearly hot enough. It's like you want 175 or more. So, put some water in the thermostat and we get that thing up pretty hot.
Yeah, there's a place near me. It's called Island Wellness, and it's like honestly, it's a very hippie place, right? It's a lot of strange people going there. Some of it's really cool though. They have what they call a fire and ice package, where you can either do cryotherapy or a cold plunge, but you basically get in the sauna for 30 minutes and then do cryotherapy and or like a 10-minute cold plunge. And they really just give you an allotment of time, like 45 minutes, and you can break it up however. If you do cryo, you have to do it in a certain order and obviously dry off and, be a little more careful. I always do the cold plunge though. So,
Mm-hmm.
you can break up your 45 minutes in 15, 5, or any variation that you could think of. But I usually do just straight up 30 minutes and 10 and then call it a day. But their sauna is amazing. And I bought like, they did this huge sale and I bought like a ton of them for a discount. But really neat place. Unfortunately, it's not as easy when you have multiple kids and or just work gets a little crazy. So once you have to leave the house, it adds complexity. But yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I like the sauna hot, like definitely over 200, which is hard to find.
Yeah. Yeah, that's like you get in there and your nose is burning. Yeah.
Yeah, when it gets up to like 220 for sure. But yeah, you don't want it over 220. I don't. That's like a max. But the sauna at the OTC, do you remember that?
Yeah, I remember it. The was it the one in the Olympic Training Center, like in the weightlifting spot, or was it the one over there in like the recovery center?
Yeah, the one in the weightlifting, like the men's locker room. There was, I don't know if there was one in the women's locker room or just the men's locker room, but
Mm.
basically there was a sauna in the men's locker room where the weightlifting was housed at the time,
Mm-hmm.
and that thing would get extremely hot. Like it was an old school, like dry sauna that would get up to yeah, like 220. Now, once they made the recovery center, they put like millions of dollars into the recovery center, and it's beautiful. But I don't know that the sauna is the same strength.
Yeah, that was a big sauna, the one in the recovery center.
Yeah,
But that little one in the training hall, that thing was like tight, so you gotta keep all the heat in.
yeah, and they had the like the I don't know, the big spoon where you could, they were basically fine with you putting water
Mm-hmm.
on the rocks, and they encouraged it because it was really about performance, not about keeping the sauna working. So it'd break all the time, and they would have to put money into it. That wasn't. It's a different time when that wasn't our money if things broke.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't hurt as bad.
Yeah, yeah, I feel that. When you look at saunas, if you want to buy one, um, they look so tempting, but they're up there. I've been looking at these barrel saunas, and man, they look cool. Like some people have these barrel saunas, and they'll have them out there, and they'll have like a whole glass back, which I don't know if that would be good because you lose a lot of heat.
Hmm.
But yeah, they got some nice saunas out now. You could spend a lot of money on them if you wanted to.
I would love to have something like that, but yeah, they're like $10,000, aren't they? Something in that range.
Yeah, I think you can get some like entry level ones, like minimum maybe like four, but
Oh,
I don't
okay,
know what
okay.
shipping's like that after that.
Yeah, putting it together would be tough too, but I know that like Hampton Morris, for instance, him and his dad have a barrel sauna and a cold plunge at the house, and amazing. I mean, they have everything, right? He takes weightlifting as professional as possible, and um, you know, they've worked hard, and so they have the means to get these things, and maybe not everybody does, but they're amazing. Like, yeah, I would love to have a barrel sauna, but to your point, these things break, and it's kind of I don't know. Unless you're like into being a handyman, all that stuff is frustrating. Where it's almost like having a membership at the place 15 minutes away is in some ways better
Mm-hmm.
because if their sauna breaks, you're only on the hook for your $40 session, or if you get them, on sale, $20 session or whatever.
Yep.
Anyways, man, you said you were working on this pole.
Oh yeah, yeah. I had an idea. I've talked to a few people about it. I haven't really jumped the gun yet, but my idea is to kind of get a poll and kind of poll some of these top level weightlifters and kind of see what they do and what they don't do, so that somebody coming up, they can kind of filter through the noise a little bit and kind of see what's actually important and see like what's going to put them on the right path for the goal that they want. Because there's just so much stuff out there where you're like, well, they're just trying to sell you something. And does it actually work? And this is kind of the idea that I'm going to do is get a poll and poll the people that have already been successful just to get a slightly better picture for, somebody coming up. And then maybe like, turn it into a little like ebook thing, and it might be really boring because it might just say all of the super basic stuff that everyone already knows, or it might be like might find some cool stuff in there.
Yeah. I certainly think that you would find some interesting stuff. I will say that weightlifting's changed a lot, and I think when we were first coming up, like weightlifting was not as there wasn't so many businesses trying to solicit people to purchase products, and that comes with pros and cons, right? I mean, I think a lot of people have amazing knowledge and deserve to be paid for that knowledge for sure, and so that's a great thing once you have that experience, but also. It definitely opens the doors for like, snake oil salesmen, people who are just good at talking the talk and just or there's a lot of because there's money involved, there's a lot of poaching involved and things like even at lower levels that used to only be something like when you were on world teams where you would get poached, but now I think it happens at the grassroots level because there's money involved and people are getting, 150, 200, $250 a month for online programming. And so that they can sometimes make promises that are a little exaggerated.
Yeah, yeah, and that would be interesting too to see, the progression over years of weightlifters. But a lot of times people people might know kind of how fast they should expect to progress, but it's tough in the moment. Almost no matter how much data you have, sometimes you still think, oh man, I need to need to progress faster, and then somebody comes along and says, hey, I'll help you progress faster. Uh, you want to believe the fairy tale.
Yeah, I mean, you can't really rush biology or physiology. Like it's on its own timeline in your own body, and it is tough. But I know as an athlete and a coach, you have totally different perspectives, and it is true. Like if your athlete has a bad day and you're looking at data and you're like, wow, the 3 weeks before that were really good. You kind of like went off script on Tuesday, and so Saturday didn't go as well as expected. Hey, like logically, that makes total sense, right? From a coach's point of view. But when you're the athlete and you're coming up on a meet, there's a lot of pressure.
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, I have to perform at this meet. Like, I cannot have a bad day on Saturday. And it feels different for sure. And that's one thing that coaching teaches you.
Yep. Yeah, to keep your eye on the big picture.
I think both of us are pretty level headed people. But I would say that's even something that like we struggle with. So I can only imagine like erratic personalities just having roller coasters of emotions and being
Mm-hmm.
pulled in different directions. So
Well, one of my favorite stories I like about Don McCauley was we were training and I missed a lift and I was mad. And, I was like, that's a lift I should have made. Um, and I was about to like go and attempt it again. And maybe it was my third time. Um, and I think he was actually talking to somebody else, but I
Mm.
thought he was talking to me. And he was just like, no way. Uh, and then I was just like, no way. But fuck you, Don. Like, I'm going to make this. But he was actually talking to somebody else. But that's an example. I was usually pretty level-headed, but when you're in the heat of the moment, uh, it sometimes it gets away from you.
Did you come back and make it? Or
Yeah, I made it after that. I think
did you
that was the
find out
pushing factor.
did you find out that he was talking to somebody else after the fact?
Yeah,
So it's kind
yeah,
of like he wasn't even addressing your situation, but it gave you the motivation to actually do it.
yeah,
That is true. I mean, in those situations, like, shit talking can be positive in that way. But if you really have to go to a, all out 10, like, is that the best in the moment? It's tricky, right? Because you got to be
hmm
able to know how to dig deep, but, you don't always have to dig a fatigue hole. But, anyways, man, yeah, I figured it would be interesting to kind of go through the exercise of looking at the questions that you have and talking through those. And I know that you had said like maybe we could go through those together and give an example so that in the future when you reach out to people.
yeah. No, this would be perfect. Um, so they I don't know. Maybe we'll even find some new questions to add in here. Um, but yeah, so we'll jump right into it. Um, so how long have you been in the sport?
Yeah, I mean, I started weightlifting. I mean, I started lifting weights when I was really young, right? I didn't have a basement, but I guess I did at certain points, but just like little small weightlifting racks, doing some bench press, whatever. Went to fat camp when I was in seventh grade, and we basically lifted weights for like 2 hours and then ran for an hour, and you'd be so sore you couldn't walk the next day, and then you would repeat it for like 4 days in a row. So literally over the summer I did that, and that was really like my intro to weight training. And then I didn't realize weightlifting was a sport until I was 16, so that was 2004. And I found a weightlifting coach, and he asked me like a few questions. I was really trying to find something to do in the off season of wrestling, and he asked me some questions, and I could already squat like 500 pounds, and so
That's crazy.
I mean, I thought that was good at the time, but then CJ front squatted it like at that age. So then I was like, oh, I thought a 500-pound squat was, I mean, it's pretty good, but anyways, I weighed about 150 pounds at the time, and I don't think he believed me, so he had me like actually do some squats. And I think I did like 405 for a set of six, and he's like, okay, like close enough. I can tell you're actually strong, and convinced me to do weightlifting. But that was in 2004, so that's uh, over
hmm
20 years now.
Yeah. 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 That would be a good thing to distinguish. There's the difference between being in weightlifting and then lifting weights, because there's quite a bit of carryover kind of going both ways.
Yeah, I think when I was a kid in the weight room, I don't know what your first exposure was to the snatch, but we we had snatches on our program, but it was like, oh, this is a speed exercise. Just do 95 pounds as fast as you can. And so we did
hmm
do snatches and kind of like a half snatch, half clean grip, but it was just all about speed. And I don't think I ever went over 135. I think most of the time it was like 95 pounds, right? Until
hmm
I met my weightlifting coach.
Yeah. Which might not have been a bad thing.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I always sucked at snatch till a certain point. So that's probably why.
Yeah. I guess looking back, kind of figuring that out.
How
Uh,
long how long did you compete in weightlifting? I mean, you still lift weights, but like from the time you started until you I don't know, effectively what you said is your last meet that you trained seriously for was 2019.
yeah. So I started weightlifting in college. So I was actually near the end of my college. So I was probably like 20 years old. Um, and then I was it was 30 when I ended. So I had 10 years kind of competitive weightlifting from, that first time I did a snatch to my last competition.
And was you had powerlifting experience before that, and how many years did you do that prior?
Hmm. So that would have been, yeah, probably about 7 or 8 years. Yeah, it would have been 8 years because I started as a freshman in high school. Yeah, so 8 years is from like strength training and powerlifting all through high school and college. And
Okay.
yeah, and we did a lot of stuff. We weren't really even like strictly powerlifting. We did, we had a bunch of wrestlers that we all trained with. And so we trained just kind of strength and conditioning as well as powerlifting.
Gotcha. And so like in the poll, like what's your goal in asking people like their background there and how long they did it, just to see like how long it took them to get to certain lifts?
Yeah, you know what? I don't want to have too many like preconceived ideas of what the data is going to say. Um,
Okay.
I just
Yeah,
kind
fair
of,
enough.
yeah, but yeah, in a way, just to kind of like represent like, you know, people that have been doing it, successfully, the average, like getting into it, like you might have like, oh, I should expect to be in this sport for this long. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, just to give some clear expectations. Because some people come in and be like, oh yeah, well, like when I started, I watched some videos of Kendrick Ferris, and I'm like, I could beat that guy. And I was thinking like, I would, and just because I didn't know, and there wasn't
Yeah.
weightlifting information back then, uh, that was not through a coach because I didn't have any weightlifting coaches around me. Um, so it, just to kind of help with clear expectations and maybe even some goal setting there.
Yeah. You know what's interesting? I mean, for someone like you, this is kind of true too, but you look at an athlete like Morgan King who maybe at a surface level had a quick rise, or maybe she is a good example, maybe she's not, but like Aaron Williams or like somebody like that who is really strong. Obviously, those people had lifted weights before or done some sort of strength and conditioning. Like you don't just go from not lifting a weight to being like freaky strong. I mean, I'm sure that exists, but that's even more rare than the person who did strength training for another sport and or has an athletic background that allows them to pick up weightlifting quickly somehow, and then they do weightlifting competitively for a couple of years and get good at it. That's one of the things that's really hard in a poll to quantify, but would be interesting
Mm-hmm.
because a lot of people kind of come from another sport and they excel super quickly. And as someone who's in the sport a while, it's kind of frustrating because you're like, man, like they've only been doing weightlifting for 2 years, but obviously they've lifted weights. They have phenomenal, um, you know, work capacity, all the foundational things that they need to excel quickly. Yeah, it's
Mm-hmm.
hard to quantify that or ask questions, but that would be interesting if you could come up with a series of questions for that type of athlete. So,
Yeah, and you know what? We'll probably find more and more of those athletes just because weightlifting, like snatch and clean and jerk, is so much more prevalent now, or it's coached better, more prevalently now.
yeah, better in the strength and conditioning realm, you mean? So they will have
Mm-hmm.
had more experience relative. Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. Um, I don't know how that will go. I mean, we have these athletes like Mary, who is a thrower, and she comes up and she's so phenomenal and she's hitting crazy numbers, right? But I'm not sure as the sport progresses, if it continues to grow and have bigger numbers, I'm not really sure that delaying specialization is the ultimate way. Um, it might be. It might be good to be more well-rounded and then really specialize for a couple years. But I have a feeling that if there was someone who is equally talented and they had more refined technique, they might lift a little more. Not like crazy amount more, but 10 kilos in a certain weight class goes along. I mean, in our weight
Mm-hmm.
classes, 10 kilos is like a crazy difference. That's the difference between not medaling at nationals and not making the world team versus winning nationals and making the world team. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So it's tough to predict.
Yeah, and then each weight class will probably have a different scenario, or maybe even the extremes.
When when we were lifting, like I've been in the sport so long and a little before you, specifically in weightlifting. So like that can be a positive or a negative, right? I think specifically in women's weightlifting, I saw women's weightlifting so much earlier when it was undeveloped that when you're in the sport for a long time, you have these preconceived notions and where you're like, maybe there's certain limits that really aren't that good, but you think that they're really good. Um, did you ever think though, when we were at Muscle Driver, that we would see someone like Olivia Reeves doing what she's doing?
Yeah, drug free. I don't know. I mean, the big one back then was Lydia.
Yeah, and there might be some like North Korean lifters that there was always, rumors that like, hey, they never show up until it matters because it was team qualification, so they wouldn't even go to the World Championships. They would show up at the Olympics and do stuff like that. But I mean,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, on U.S. soil, tested by USADA, I definitely never thought that that was even possible what she's doing. And now that she's doing it, and I'm starting to think about things in a different way, I don't I I don't think she's even at the limit. I'm like, uh, I think that we'll see many people do that, and I've totally changed my perspective on what is possible for weightlifting in general, but more specifically, even women's weightlifting. I think it's just growing so fast, and it's just still so new.
Yeah, I mean, even in 2016, around there, or even 14 to 16, a 200 kilo total was a big deal in like almost any weight class.
I mean,
And
Jenny Arthur, I mean, she's still around. She made the world team. She's killing it. She snatched 108 and clean jerk 135. But at the time when she was coming up, she was the equivalent of Olivia Reeves, right? And so she was, when she got to 100 and 125 at around 69 to 75 kilos body weight, like I did not think that we would see a 125 snatch at 69 kilos body weight, right? She was clean
mm-hmm.
and jerking 125, and I was like, wow, she is the outlier. Like she's the one that is the generational talent, and she absolutely was. And if it wasn't for her, you wouldn't have people believing things were possible. But at the same time, now Olivia is literally probably going to snatch 125 at the World Championship. She may not, but like she'll be close. She's snatching 120 to 123 in training, so it's like she literally can snatch what Jenny was clean and jerking. Jenny is an amazing athlete, so I'm not saying that to take anything away from her. I'm just putting in perspective like what Olivia is doing, and I would have never expected that. So I was just curious if, as a slightly more of an outsider, but still you were in it during that time, if you even had thoughts that this was possible. So
Yeah, I mean, just the way that women's weightlifting has progressed since then is pretty wild. That like just the depth overall, you know. Even yeah, I think I was even watching some of the 49s at nationals this past year, and I was surprised just at how much that they were hitting. Going all the way up. I mean, Olivia would have probably medaled as a super heavyweight at the Olympics or even World Championships with the total she's hitting
yeah, I
now,
mean,
which
I
is
mean,
crazy.
literally, she hit a 275, whether it was in training or meet, but she hit a 270 in a meet. And Cheryl Hayworth in 2000 hit a 275 and got a bronze medal in the super heavyweight weight class.
Mm-hmm.
You know, um, it's crazy. Like, I mean, even a 275 today in the super heavyweight weight class is a relevant total at the World Championships. So yeah, that's really phenomenal. We did get off on a major tangent there, but I think it was somewhat useful. But yeah, so the first question was essentially how long have you been lifting, and then what's the next one?
So, how many years after you started did you hit your best lifts?
Yeah, so my best absolute lifts uh were 11 years into weightlifting.
Yeah, 11 years. What was that? The 155, 195?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yep. I think I remember those pretty specifically. Yeah, those were big.
Yeah, and I mean there were a couple times like I think I could have reached those numbers a little quicker, but there were a couple times where I throughout my weightlifting career, like I've always tried to set up my weightlifting where I could do it continuously, but what that means is I have to take periods of time where I do something, right? So like I had to finish my undergraduate degree. So I
Mm-hmm.
had like a pretty big dip in performance during the time. I lived at the OTC for a couple years, came back, finished my degree. So at the OTC, I made big progress. Then I went and finished school and, got into some other, I became president of my fraternity, just things that were a lot of responsibility. Performance goes down a good bit, but I'm still in the gym. It's just your stress levels are high and you're not sleeping as much, so you're not like performing as well. So that was probably a good 2, 3 years, and then went to muscle driver and hit those lifts about a year and a half to 2 years after joining muscle driver. Uh, so effectively, possibly could have hit those numbers a little faster. Possibly, if I didn't do that type of thing again later, might could have hit slightly more weight as well. But 11 years for me personally. What about you?
I think mine was right at 5
5.
in 5 years in the sports. So, and then if we take the first 7 years of powerlifting, and then you add the 5, so that would have been about 12
Yeah.
from the start of training. Um, but yeah, I think that was one of the things that maybe those situations kind of taught you how to, manage life and weightlifting together, which kind of maybe gave you some of that good longevity. Um, because that was, there's a that's definitely an aspect to longevity. Is you're in the gym lifting, you're like, oh, I need to, either go 100% this way or 100% that way, or I've had those thoughts in my mind too when I was weightlifting, um, which is I think that was something that you did really well, kind of managing both sides of the coin.
Yeah. And I mean, all throughout the time, like I've always tried to optimize my performance. It's just when you truly have extra stress, my performance would go down significantly, right? So whether I was finishing college, um, and then I like last year, for instance, I went back to school and finished up my master's degree. I kind of was doing that over a number of years, but actually had to buckle down and finish it. And through that time too, it's like basically, you know, uh, you're sitting at a computer a lot and you basically it's harder to manage your weight and things like that. That's probably something that I've struggled. My weight goes up and down a little bit based on some different things and stress levels, where that obviously means like if I'm in a certain weight class, I'm going to be more competitive, right? So that's part of it too. um, I think a lot of people view weightlifting, and it was sort of told to me like you should put everything on hold, do it until you can't anymore and be done with it, and then leave the sport, because you can't really do this when you're over 30, for instance. And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
wow, in hindsight, I really think if I had had a perfect scenario and trained a certain way, I could have probably peaked at 35, like done my best lifts, right? Like I certainly don't feel like 30 was limiting. I think that was like the middle of like your prime years. Now, my circumstances weren't prime, but I think that if you truly believed and understood that your body can do things a lot longer if you train the right way and give yourself the right circumstances, and you actually pull off giving yourself those circumstances, I don't think everybody's gonna be CJ or Olivia where you're like a phenom as a kid. I think some people are gonna be people who become excellent in their 30s, but they were average when they were 18. And I think sometimes you see child phenoms kind of not able to sustain that performance for the long term. So you kind of really can't change that. And it's easy to say when you're 18 and you see like a CJ Cummings and Olivia Reeves doing these crazy things, or like Hamp, it's easy to say, well, like, what's the point of even doing this? And so you don't really continue to pursue it to become that when you're 30, right?
Mm-hmm.
But in order to do something until you're 30, you do have to like do certain things. You can't skip college until you're 27 and then do it, right? You kind of have to, unless it's apparent that you are at the ability level to make the Olympics, you kind of need to do the things that you want to achieve in life at a certain point so that later when the opportunity presents itself, you can take it. So you don't have to
Mm-hmm.
pigeonhole yourself into thinking like, hey, I have to do this now and this is my only opportunity. I really think, I mean, I genuinely believe even today, like my circumstances are so much different, but the way that the weights feel and the way that my body recovers when I can have some time off work and train hard, like it's the same as ever. So I may not be as talented as some of the kids coming up, but if I was and I had the same circumstances, I don't think even at this point age is the limiting factor. It becomes a limiting factor at some point.
Yeah. But yeah, you're saying more it's just lifestyle or just responsibilities that end up being some of those limiting factors, or maybe
Oh,
even
yeah.
expectations.
Yeah, all of that for sure. Um, so yeah, I mean, when you're younger, it's so much easier just to say, to get your parents on board. So maybe they're still willing to support certain people. Um, some people have parents that are willing to support them, right? It's also like, I mean, USA weightlifting in general is always going to be more interested in supporting a younger athlete that's equal in ability to an older athlete. So even at that level, you're kind of at an uphill battle when you become older. So it's absolutely because of expectations from your parents, your spouse, your kids, everything like it's totally different, but under equal circumstances I believe that you could have similar results, right? And I think there's a concept, and we'll kind of get to the next question after this, but I think there's a concept that, all right, so there's a certain point in time where your potential is at its apex, right? But you may not be operating at your full potential. So because I didn't train perfectly, I only reached 93% of my potential here, right?
Mm-hmm.
So then I kind of leave my prime years, my potential goes down a couple percent to like 98% of what that was, or 97%, but I'm operating closer to my ceiling. So my ceiling's gone down, but I'm operating closer to my ceiling. So I'm either exceeding what I did when I had the most potential or matching what I did. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, the the obvious thing is somebody that corrects their technique and then starts hitting PRs. And yeah, I've had an athlete like that made. Sometimes it's hard for people to correct technique, but when they make that big change, now he can operate a lot closer to his ceiling, even though he's not nearly as strong as he was when he was 22.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, no, that's cool.
Or just like, when you're a kid and you assume the coach that you're working with, and they might know a lot about weightlifting. When I was coming up, I had a lot of really great coaches, but I do think that our knowledge on weightlifting is a little higher now, on average. I think the average weightlifting coach probably has a better idea of technique and programming. Um, not to say that anyone in my past didn't. I mean, I think I was around a lot of the people. Like I lived at the OTC. My original coach was phenomenal with kids. So I think I had a great upbringing, but I think someone now at random has a better opportunity to meet a coach who knows what they're talking about because like you can find a gym that has weights, who has a
Mm-hmm.
weightlifting coach. Before it was like this underground sport. And so I think when you're a kid, when I was coming up anyways, you just kind of did well based on talent, and it was a really small talent pool. So if you had any talent, you kind of like had the ability to come up the ladder pretty quickly. But then as you get older, you have to win with your brain, meaning like you have to truly understand how to train and how to peak and do all those things so that you can operate closer to your potential, even if that's a little lower.
Yeah, playing smart.
It's kind of like Tom Brady or something, you know. I think football and quarterbacking is obviously a lot different than weightlifting and maybe the age at which you can do it. But I think it's like he studied the game so hard, so he was able to sustain success, even though his athleticism, and he really never had a ton of athleticism. But even when it started to decline, he could still perform at a high level because he truly understood the game that he was playing.
Athleticism. That's a hard word to define, but something I thought of, a quote that I thought of earlier when we were talking is, you know, it kind of goes along with the expectation things, but you know, comparison is the thief of joy. You know, if you're comparing yourself to somebody, maybe you're that person that peaks when they're 30 and you're average at 18. You know, I think it's good to get away from that comparison, and just you know, focus on getting as close as you can to your ceiling, like you said.
Yeah, I mean, there were times, right, like that it was hard for me to keep going because, like, you know, after you win nationals or something and you have kids like CJ Cummings and Hampton Morris coming up and they're beating you by a lot, I mean, that's hard to decide, like, should I still be doing this, right? And like, of course, the court of public opinion is like, I mean, even so young as like 27, they'll be like, oh, this person's so old, and you know that they're already saying you're too old to do it. Like this is 10 years ago almost, and you know, people start catching up to you and surpass you, and um, you know, I think like we had a certain amount of popularity at Muscle Driver because we had some visibility, um, but I think there was a lot of positives that went with that, but I don't think that I ever got enough popularity per se to be attached to that idea or make that my why to do weightlifting. Like I always liked to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And but I experienced a little bit of it, so mostly the positive effects. But when you start to lose that, even just that small amount of pseudo fame, it is hard to deal with. And so I could imagine like someone who's really famous, like a Brad Pitt or so, they can't even go out to eat. So they have a lot of negative things that come along with their extreme fame. Like we experience mostly just the positive stuff, right? And but when people stop caring about your weightlifting and you're losing followers and like nobody cares anymore, if your why is attached to that, then it's easy just to call it quits, right? And
Mm-hmm.
and that is something that I struggle with a little bit, but not it was never my main why. And I'm thankful that I didn't have a lot of popularity because it would have become my why, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's good. That's a good point. Because it'll happen. Somebody younger will come up.
Now, if so, you hit your best lift 5 years into weightlifting. You did powerlifting for 7 to 8 years before that. Um, do you feel like if you had specialized a little earlier, like what do you feel like would have been ideal for you to reach a higher peak or do it earlier?
I think I would have had a better squat if I did it earlier.
Which is so
Um,
interesting.
yeah. My powerlifting coach was a West Side type of West Side barbell coach. So he had us doing like wide box squats. And anybody who's seen my weightlifting sees how narrow I catch. My hips just are not made to go wide. And so I think maybe the wide box squats probably helped out on my on my pull and my deadlift and all that, but my squat was just terrible. And that's actually why I got into weightlifting, because I saw some of these videos of some weightlifters hitting some big squats, and I'm like, all right, maybe I need to do some of their training to kind of boost my squat, because whatever I'm doing now is not working.
Yeah.
And then it turns out I just liked weightlifting a little bit more. But yeah, I think if I had specialized and kind of gotten, um, my upright squat muscles stronger from a younger age, I think that would have helped.
Yeah. Nice.
So, it would have helped if I refined my technique, because I probably ran into some, things getting beat up when they didn't need to get beat up. If I just had a less stressful technique, because I was pretty wild there in the beginning with my technique. Took a while for Don and Glenn to kind of help dial that in.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
So, how long were you able to maintain that same total? Kind of that 350 kind of range. I know you were kind of a unique situation because you went in different weight classes, but would you went across different weight classes, and maybe you were at 85 when you hit that 350?
Yeah, so I was weighing about 88 and a half in training, somewhere in there when I hit that total. Um, I think that I am unique to answer that question. So I would say I maintained my Sinclair
Mm.
up until 2023 even, which is really the last main serious competition that I did. Like at the Arnold, I cut down in an attempt to make the world team, to be in the Olympic process, and miss making the world team by like a kilo or two. I think 2 kilos. And so I hit a 316 to 73 kilos, which is roughly a similar Sinclair to a 341 at 85. Um, Depending on what year's formula you use, it might even be better. Um, so I think that I could still do a similar Sinclair in the right weight class. And I think maybe too, like during that time, I think because I was heavier, I was like kind of a tank in training. Like I could train and get beat up and still train hard. And I think maybe when you're like really lean and even say like in the correct weight class per se, like you do have to be a little more structured with your training. So it's probably a blessing for my longevity that I was like heavier at that point, but I'm not really sure that that was like an optimized Sinclair or whatever at that
Mm-hmm.
time. So
Yeah, that's an interesting way. I think I should probably kind of reword my question around that. How were you able to maintain a similar Sinclair? I like that a little bit better.
yeah, I think 99%, or maybe not 99, but I think like 85 to 90% of the people that you're going to talk to competed in similar weight classes, or like moved up in weight class. So they're not going to be like me, where I've competed anywhere from 73 to 89 kilos, right? And
Yep.
then the weight classes change. So it's probably like 6 or 7 weight classes along the way. So yeah, I think I'm unique. That's why I framed it that way.
Yeah. No, that's a good distinction. So my next question is, you know, kind of going into the coaching. How long did you stay with the same coach? And then kind of along with that is, how many different coaches have you had?
Yeah. For me, I've had probably like 4 or 5 coaches throughout my career, but most of those were like long term. So like I first started out with a coach named CJ Stockel, worked with him for a couple years until I got the opportunity to go to the Olympic Training Center. And the way it worked back then, like I went to the Olympic Training Center, but I was still in contact with CJ, and he was essentially still maybe my coach of record, even though Paul Fleshler was the coach at the OTC and programming for me. Um, so I worked with Paul for a couple years while I was at the OTC. Then I came back home to finish college, and I essentially coached myself for several years, although CJ was my coach of record again.
This was
And I,
the CrossFit Atlanta days, huh?
yeah, yeah. So it was kind of just really experimenting with a bunch of stuff. Honestly, we did some crazy training. We trained like seven days a week, kind of like, John Bros was getting big with Pat Mendez, and we would just train as hard as we could. And um, yeah, it was a very interesting experience. Luckily, I never got injured though. Like that's one thing about me is at that point in time, like I was always very durable, which is maybe something that I didn't know about myself that maybe other people don't experience, but that not everyone can do that and come out without
Mm-hmm.
having some kind of surgery. So then I did that, but still, like, CJ's coaching me at meets, in contact with him, but he's not really doing the day-to-day stuff anymore. And then moved to Muscle Driver and worked with predominantly Glenn Pinlay. Um, and of course, we had Don, Travis Mash was there, Chris Wilkes was there a little bit, but Glenn was always the one that programmed for me. Um, and then Walt Neubauer is my coach now, so we kind of collaborate on some stuff and have been working with him for a few years. So um, I've had several different coaches, and for different reasons. Like I've never had a bad experience where I just left a coach and there was some bad thing that happened that caused it. It was just experiences like getting an opportunity to work at the OTC, coming home to finish college, getting an opportunity to work with Glenn at Muscle Driver, and then Muscle Driver falling apart, kind of coming back on my own, and then working with Walt, right? So it's several different coaches, but it wasn't like coach hopping.
Yeah. Yeah. And so you probably started working with Walt, what, around 2018?
Yeah, let me see. Yeah, 2017 or 2018. So
Yeah. So
yeah,
that's a
it's
good,
actually been a while. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. And then we worked with Glenn for those pretty much 4 years,
Mm-hmm.
that quad. And there was a little bit of a dip in there, um, when he had his stroke in 2014, I think it was.
Yep. Yeah, at the American Open in 13. So yeah, right into 2014 year. He was mostly incapable of coaching for that year.
Yeah. And then like a collaboration with CJ and Paul Fleshler. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then that's kind of that. I think that's a good thing to put in there is, um, you know, actually Walt and I've known Walt for quite a while.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think before either of us were in weightlifting, which is funny. Uh, Now that we're both kind of mostly in weightlifting, but in particular, I've coached some athletes that have worked with him, and then he's coached some of athletes that have worked with me. And one of the things is it's always a great conversation. Like if I'm working with somebody, I just give Walt a call and be like, "Hey, there's this person that wants to work with me. They used to work with you," and you just have that conversation. Um, I was thinking of that when you said like about coach hopping. That's such a good trait to have, to kind of develop that. You know, what would you call it? Like a professional link, or a network.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you basically have the trust that it's like, hey, I know that James didn't necessarily try to poach this person on purpose, but they did reach out to him, and since he has that trust in you, he can have that conversation. Where that may not be the case with everyone, that you might feel like your athlete got directly poached and it wasn't their idea, if it comes from someone who's not as in a friendly relationship with you, right? So
Yeah, yeah, it's worth the, even just for anyone listening, it's worth having the call clear in the air, because then you don't have to carry that around with you. Um, but that's another aside from the actual point of this thing, because I know you probably still have a really good relationship with CJ, your first coach.
yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be in the sport if it wasn't for him, and I mean, he's not really involved in the sport anymore, so it's not like uh, he's coaching a bunch of people, and I chose not to work with him or anything like that, right? Like he mostly uh, got into the niche of high school strength and conditioning, and is in the Hall of Fame of the Georgia High School Strength and Conditioning. Association, and I believe that's what it's called. I probably said it wrong, but yeah, I mean he's really well regarded in the strength and conditioning world in high school, and really just got entrenched in that and just kind of wasn't as involved at the USA weightlifting level anymore. But when I was coming up, he was really involved with the USA weightlifting, was coaching some, youth Pan Am, junior Pan Am teams, and was really involved in the sport. So good terms with all my coaches. I think they're all great. Unfortunately, Don and Glenn, we aren't able to have a relationship with them anymore because they passed away. But that, as you get older, that kind of happens too, even though they were both relatively young in the big scheme of things.
Yeah. Yeah. Rough time. But so did you play on other sports growing up? You know what's funny is I'm asking you this, and we live together, so I know all these
Yeah.
answers. So it's funny for me to ask you these questions.
Yeah, for
So
sure.
you played wrestling. You played wrestling.
Played.
Uh,
Yeah, I played all kinds of sports when I was growing up. Played baseball from the time that I was like probably 4 years old until 10th grade. Then I kind of tweaked my elbow. Got into wrestling in 8th grade, played roller hockey, played football when I was younger up until 10th grade. So yeah, played a variety of sports. I'd say my best sports were baseball and wrestling. And I wouldn't say that I was like an amazing wrestler or anything. I do think my area was somewhat competitive, even though that Georgia isn't considered like a top wrestling state. I think that it's more competitive than a lot of states when I was coming up. So I was a decent wrestler, but even on a state level, I wasn't like state champion or state medalist, right? There was a lot of really good people. But that was my whole goal. When I found weightlifting, I was trying to find a way to get better at wrestling. I
hmm.
was really looking for an outlet to get better at wrestling that next season. And then essentially I found the sport of weightlifting through that.
Yeah, yeah, that's works good for that.
Yeah. And I know that like so you wrestled as well, right? And obviously powerlifting, and did you do any other sports? I know you sort of lived on a boat and did a lot of stuff where you're rowing a lot.
Yeah, a lot of rowing growing up, and living on a sailboat, there's a certain amount of work that you do with your back. I was young, so I like if I had to go climb up and climb the mast and do something up there, you know, or pulling the anchor up, that's a that's a workout right there. And then rowing, um, and then we had some other things. And what's funny is I'm not a great swimmer. I think all of the weightlifting that I've done over the years has made my bone density higher than normal. And I got a DEXA scan a while back too that kind of showed that as well. And it's still, if I get in a pool, I sink to the bottom. So I'm not a great swimmer as far as like staying afloat, but we did a lot of swimming. Like we had to dive under the boat, hold our breath for a long time and scrub barnacles off the bottom of the boat. So it was just work when I was young, living on the boat. And then coming into traditional sport, I don't think I started. I think I might have done like a T-ball. I remember striking out in T-ball. So, any throwing or striking sports I was never great at. And then starting organized sport in high school, which would have been wrestling and powerlifting. And maybe I played lacrosse for a year or two. Again, throwing and striking. It wasn't.
Yeah, I think wrestling was a good sport for weightlifting because it taught you how to get into a weight class, and uh, it some of this can be positive or negative, but like cutting weight became something that was I understood how to do it. It was normal, um, and it gives you a lot of work capacity. Wrestling is probably,
Mm-hmm.
in my opinion, even today, I think it's like the hardest sport because like wrestling rewards the more work you do, the better you are at it, and I think like you really have to fight through absurd amounts of fatigue to get good at
Mm-hmm.
wrestling, and that's like more rewarded than it is in weightlifting even. And I think without wrestling, I wouldn't have been able to do things like remember when we trained like those like mini sessions, the 15 mini sessions.
Yep.
Like that was extremely difficult, but it was like fun in some sick sort of way because it reminds you of like wrestling almost. Like you just like really have to grit down towards the end of the day. So um, yeah, I think it's a good sport for sure.
Yep. I agree. Yeah, that work capacity, and the small scale and the big scale. You learn how to push through sets, and then you learn how to push through training cycles. Both aspects of that
Mhm.
with wrestling.
Yeah, I think wrestling is something that we could recruit more people from, like when they're out of high school. I think like the 103 weight class in high school. I think that's such a weight class where there's some really freaky kids that basically don't have anything to do after high school competitively that are not going to play any sports after that. And they would fit perfectly into the 60-kilo weight class, right? Um, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I remember seeing these kids who were like 103 and they're like, you know, 5 foot to 5'3". They're super muscular, man. They're like they would. I just
Mm-hmm.
feel like they would be weightlifters, but
Yep.
I don't see a whole lot of crossover like that.
I can think of people exactly. We had a 112. His name was James Brown. And he pulled 405 when he was, maybe a junior in high school, which
Hmm.
is, over 3 times body weight, which is,
Yeah, at
I didn't,
112 pounds, that's tiny dude.
yeah, yeah. So he competed at 112. I don't know what he weighed when he pulled 405. He was probably over 112, but still, it was over 3 times body weight at, 16, which is good. I don't think I hit a 3 times body weight until I was like 19. Um, so that, yeah, it, I thought of him exactly when you were talking about those lightweight guys. He would have been a good weightlifter too, I think.
Hmm. Yeah, for sure.
Um, so we kind of talked about this in the first question. But what age were you when you started weightlifting? Which you said 16, right?
Yeah, competitive weightlifting 16. I probably was lifting weights on and off from the time I was 12.
Yeah. Um, yeah, that sounds about the same with me. I was probably about 12. No, I was a little older than that because I started when I was in when I went into high school. So what are you,
Yeah.
14, 13, 14?
Yeah, probably 14.
Yeah. And then I started weightlifting when I was snatch, clean, and jerk when I was 21. I guess my senior year of college. So that's a big difference even between the two of us. Uh,
Yeah, and I mean, for that time, I was lucky to find weightlifting, so it was not a normal thing for people to start weightlifting when they're like 9 years old, right? So I think now, after 20 years has gone by, and you say, "Oh, I started at 16," that's almost like you started late. But when I was a kid, I think like being lucky and finding weightlifting, not many people started before they were 18. So
yeah,
that
I
was
know.
almost like kind of early, so that's just shifted just because of the popularity of the sport.
Yeah, I could imagine. I don't think my daughter's interested in weightlifting, um, but she did her first competition when she was like 5. So,
Yeah.
that she might have been a little bit older. Maybe it was 6, but still, then this data would be all over the place.
Yeah, for sure.
So, when was your what year was your first international meet and your last? Um, and this one's a little bit more in depth because we can kind of go back and forth between, you know, junior, senior, youth. Um,
Yeah, so I mean, I made a like a minor youth team in 2005, but it I would say a meaningful senior team 2013. Probably the same time you did. You made the Pan Ams that year too, right? So
yeah,
probably the same meet that it was for you.
Venezuela.
Yeah, that was pretty cool. And I made a couple of junior teams and stuff, but I would say, first meaningful senior international team 2013, and then I made the Pan Am Games in 2023 was the last time I competed at the moment. I mean, I went to a local meet and I plan to go to kind of like build into another period of serious training, but at this point that was essentially the last serious meet I did.
Yeah, yeah. So that's like 10 years of senior international meets.
Yeah, if you count like junior meets, it would be skewed because it would be like almost 18 years, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I wasn't at enough of a meaningful total that that would probably even make a youth team now.
Yeah, just such depth now. Yeah, and then if I run those same meet 2013, and then my last one, I was on the 17 Pan Am team, and I pulled out 2 weeks before it, so my last one was in 2016.
hmm But you
Pan Am's.
qualified in 17.
Yep.
Um, you know what's interesting? So the Isle of Margarita and Venezuela, kind of bringing it back to 2013.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there was a couple things about that meet. So for one, they were like, "Oh, it's kind of dangerous to go to Venezuela." And remember when we had to go in Caracas? I think you and Glenn went earlier because you were 77 at that point. I was an 85,
Yep.
and you guys had to stay overnight with armed guards. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And then
Yeah.
you had a flight the next day.
Yeah. We had a crazy. Well, first we flew to Florida, and the flight got canceled. Uh, for some reason. So then we were in the airport until like 11:30 at night. Then we stayed in a hotel in Florida, and then we went from Florida to Panama. And once we got to Panama, we stayed there the night because we had to buy tickets to fly into Venezuela because you couldn't buy them from the United States. So then they planned. So then we went from Panama to Caracas, and the U.S. Embassy came and picked us up in like armored cars with real thick, short glass on the windows and stuff. And so that was kind of cool. And, kind of a shock because, you got armed military in the airport when, in the United States, you
Mm.
don't see any guns inside like the airport, which is just different. Um, and then we stayed in Caracas that night, and then we flew this little two propeller plane over to the Isle of Margarita, and then we got on um, this bus, and we drove for about an hour on the Isle of Margarita, just packed full of weightlifters. It was one of those ones that look like a looks like a sprinter van, and like the seats fold down, and they're all crooked and sideways, and like four people across on every row, maybe like 5 or 6 rows, and we're just packed hot June or whatever month it was in Venezuela. Um, yeah, that was a long trip.
Yeah, that was my experience was totally different. I mean, I did go like Miami, Panama City, Caracas, the Isle of Margarita, but it was all in one day.
Hmm.
Or maybe we had our overnight in Miami. So like we didn't have an overnight overseas that was like your experience, but I know that once we got to Caracas and we had to change terminals to get on the flight to the Isle of Margarita, the consulate was there as well, and they had like these armed guards. And so while we were walking between terminals, I remember they were pulling their guns because they thought what this car was like scoping us out. And I was sort of
Mm.
oblivious to it, but I'm just kind of in my own world, like pulling my suitcase, and then all of a sudden everybody's telling me what happened behind there, and I'm like, holy crap, I didn't even know that happened.
Yeah.
But it is true that like, you can travel places and it's not necessarily safe like it is here. I mean, you can travel anywhere within the United States that can be dangerous, but it was considered very dangerous there. We were told not to wear our USA gear to travel.
Hmm.
Essentially, when we were on the beach, we just told them like, we're Canadian. We speak
Yep.
English, but we're Canadian, and that's what we were told to do when we weren't in the like all-inclusive resort. Um, so I watched this documentary, and it's a Netflix one. I don't know if you've ever heard of the Amy Bradley case, but she basically went missing from a cruise ship.
No, no, I
And
haven't.
yeah, so some people think that she fell off or jumped over and committed suicide, and some people think that she was potentially trafficked. Um, and it's not really clear one way or the other, so it's hard to have an opinion. But they mention the Isle of Margarita, and they said a lot of like human trafficking happens there. And I was like, wow, we were there, and that's like a tiny place, right?
Hmm.
So when I finished the competition there, we weighed in, at the hotel for my session because it was early in the morning. And so I gave my passport to weigh in, and then we went back to the room, and we didn't take our passports to the meet. But I ended up meddling, and I had to get drug tested, and I didn't have my passport. And so they collected my
Mm.
sample and put it off to the side. And I was like super sketched out because I'm like, what the fuck? Like if they switch my sample with somebody here, like
Mm-hmm.
I'm kind of fucked because like a lot of these people are on drugs and I'm not. And like if they switch my sample, like I could be in it's a really weird situation. So I wasn't
Mm-hmm.
happy about it, but we had to take a cab from there to the airport, and they took all these wrong turns, man. And me and the doctor were like really, I can't remember what his name was. He's like an Asian guy. He was our team doctor, if you can recall.
I remember Dr. Lavelli, and
Yeah, it wasn't like one of the main ones. Like I only saw him a couple times, but he was a real nice dude. Yeah, so like we're in this cab trying to get my passport, and we're going the wrong way to a resort that is not ours. It's probably one of these sketchy ones that's mentioned in the documentary. I literally like we recognize we're not going the right direction, and I'm like, oh fuck. So like I'm trying to like subtly plan with this dude. If we get to a point where we have to run, we need to go separate directions. He can only shoot one way. Like I hope that I fucking make it back. Anyways, it ends out being like this honest mistake, and he takes us to the hotel, and we're all good. Yeah, I mean, I was freaking out.
yeah, I know. Well, you stopped thinking about your sample at that
I
point.
know at that point it's irrelevant, but
Yeah.
yeah. So, anyways, I ended up making it back and have my passport, and my drug test is good because they didn't switch my sample, and so
Hmm.
life's good, right? Could have gone any number of directions that day.
Yeah, I think I remember that same meet as Donovan Ford said that he got tested too,
Yep.
and that the people drug testing somebody else from a different country, um, like they dropped the sample and like it just spilled all over the place, and then the drug testing people were just like, go whatever.
I know. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
That
and so
seems so
that's how drug
sketchy, right?
testing used to be.
Well, Pan
And
Am's is notoriously just a total shit show anyway, with everything, right?
hmm
With everything. But anyways, yeah, that was kind of a side tangent, but I was just reminded of the Isle of Margarita based on that documentary, and that
hmm
was a pretty fun meet.
yeah, I'm gonna have to watch that one.
It's mentioned like 2 seconds, so it's not like you're not gonna get a whole lot of that in there, but it is somewhat of an interesting documentary regardless.
Yeah, well, it's just like the almost the hometown fame type of thing. If your hometown gets made or mentioned in something, everybody knows about it. Uh,
Yeah.
well, I don't know about you. I grew up in a small town. Uh, I don't know if it's ever been mentioned in anything big.
Well,
Um,
Wilmington's mentioned a lot if you pay attention, but obviously, I mean, you're talking about Hampstead, right?
yeah, Hampstead.
Yeah.
Yeah, uh, yeah, it's big now, but when I was growing up, it was not big. Um, so going into this next question, and this is kind of probably going to vary a lot for you based on how long you've been weightlifting, but how many times a week have you trained? Um, how many times a week did you train when you started, and how did that change as you progressed as an athlete?
Yeah, I mean, weightlifting specific training when I started was 3 days a week. However, I did, I had team practices for other sports outside of that. Um, and our football team, like sometimes we would live, like over the summer, we would like live at the school for a couple weeks and we'd do like 3 days. Uh, and that would be, one of them would be weight training and then two of them would be football practices. And then we'd essentially just have like air mattresses in the gym. I guess like they can't do that kind of thing anymore. So like most athletes in high school have never experienced 2 a days in any sport, which is crazy to me because we did 3 days. But so I think like I did a lot and had a lot of work capacity. I think I built up eventually to where for about 1 year I tried to train 7 days a week. Um, that was mostly snatching, which did make my snatch better. but in the clean and jerk, I think like kind of like an appropriate amount of training is best with a lot of strength work. Um, but yeah, so I think in my mind, what I did was not ideal. I think that if you could start by training 3 times a week or 2 times a week even, and be able to track that and have like how much volume am I completing, and then progressively overload that over time in a systematic fashion, I think that's ideal. Very hard to pull off. But if you can do that from the time you're 15 until you're 35, I think that's really how you hit an ultimate peak and avoid injuries. But it's not what I did in reality. I always tried to train as much as possible given my schedule, and sometimes that meant if I'm in school, I might train 3 days a week. If I'm literally doing nothing but weightlifting, I try to train 7 days a week. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So, how many times a week do you train now?
Now, yeah, that depends. Between 3 and 5. I think if I'm really trying to take things as seriously as possible in those times, I train 5, and that's all I can fit in. And I think it's about as much as I can realistically recover from given my life stresses.
Yeah. So in the mix there, I know we did 9 sessions a week when we were at Muscle Driver. Did you do any other like specific weightlifting 2 a days, other like outside of Muscle Driver?
Prior to Muscle Driver, and I think the reason why I was one of the few people who could sustain that training is I lived at the Olympic Training Center where we trained 9 times a week. And it was less intense, but more volume. So we were doing a lot of volume at that time, and I was like 19 to 20. So that was several years before Muscle Driver. So when I reached Muscle Driver, I had done that plus gone through a period where I tried to train 7 days a week and multiple sessions a day if I could prior to coming to Muscle Driver. Whereas I think some people didn't have the same experience with like insane amounts of volume and couldn't recover from that. And it was even hard for me to recover from those sessions, right? So
Yeah, they were tough.
with years of 2 a day, multiple times a week training sessions. So um, I don't know. I have mixed emotions about what is needed to get really good now. I mean, at that time, everybody notably was like, the more you do, the better, right? Like do as much as you can. But I think now we have like Olivia and even like Jenny Arthur, and her return to weightlifting is only training 4 times a week. So I think you have people who are training less and getting better results relatively. So it's almost like obviously you don't want to do more if it's not doing more for you.
Yeah.
But
I think Glenn used to put it as, stay a beginner as long as you can. If you're making progress on 3, why do 4? You know, milk 3 for as long as you can.
yeah, yeah, he certainly preached that. But everybody that was on our team, it was expected that we were built up to that, and that may not have been reality.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so we were expected to do the 9 sessions a week, which for me was extremely fun. I loved it. I loved it.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know that it was like truly ideal.
Yeah. Yeah, I could see that. So how long were you at the Olympic Training Center?
A little over a year and a half. So like less than 2 years, but more than a year and a half. So
Nice. Yeah. So me coming up, it was 3 times a week.
hmm
And then, I probably upped that up to maybe like 3 to 5 um, before I joined Muscle Driver. And then we jumped right into, 9 times a week.
yeah.
And keeping that in mind, and that's just weightlifting. And like you said, some of your 3 days were like footballs and other type of things, and wrestling that would have built up that work capacity. So those are all like different factors that kind of come into play there. Because I might have been like 3 to 5 times a week in the gym, but I was very active out doing other stuff too.
Yeah, I was pretty inactive aside from being in the gym because I was already doing so much in the gym. It's like I have to lay down.
Yeah. 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 I think when I was doing powerlifting, powerlifting's different now. We've talked about, with tracking volume and things like that. And, some of these powerlifting sessions, go into, I think I was talking to Chad Wesley Smith about this probably in, 2015 or something, where he'd have people, a couple hours doing powerlifting, but we were like an hour to an hour and a half. Like an hour and a half was our long session. Like we'd go in there and we'd work hard, very short rest breaks. So it was a lot of work density. So our sessions were a little bit smaller, but they were very intentional. And, you know, some powerlifters are going to hate me for this, but there was just not as much technical component to it. So, you didn't need quite as much rest on certain things, or you didn't have to spend extra time, analyzing technique or refining things that tend to take a little bit longer.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, then after Muscle Driver, I was probably training 5 times a week after that for a while, 4 to 5. I was working with Dave Fleming for a while, and his sessions were very long, 3.5 hours sometimes.
Mm.
But it was only 4 sessions a week usually. And then I think I went back up. I worked with Leo Totten for a while after that, and that was about 5. But I don't think I ever did 2-a-days again after Muscle Driver.
Yeah, I mean, even now, like occasionally I'll split up my workout, but it's not intended to be a 2 a day or like a full 2 training session. It might just be like, oh, I have time during my lunch break to get squats, and
Mm-hmm.
I'll do my squats and then I'll do the rest of it later. It's more of an attempt to be out of the house less time after work
Mm-hmm.
than it is to try to optimize my performance. It's just like I want to get everything done. And so it's easier for me to take this time that I have now than flip a coin and make sure that I have that time later.
Yeah. Yeah. And that would be more interesting to see that, a more detailed tracking of volume like you were talking about, and keeping that more as the main focus rather than, how many times a day you were training.
Mhm.
So yeah, it's interesting. So then, those years you were probably stopped doing 2-a-days kind of in the late 20s.
Oh, in my late 20s. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, basically in 2016. Geez. Yeah, I was like 28.
Yeah. Um, so when I wrote this question, I was thinking of you. How much do you sleep every night?
Yeah, I track my sleep on Fitbit, and I think like, prior to wearing a wearable, you just kind of say like you sleep X amount. So I think right now my average on a year basis is like 7 hours and 15 minutes of actual sleep. So time in bed is probably over 8 hours, but the actual time that I'm asleep is about 7:15. I can certainly say that I slept more when I was younger. I would love to sleep more now. Um, I think not everybody requires as much sleep. I think there's certain people who require much less sleep than me. I think that I'm someone who needs a lot. But regardless, whatever sleep that you do need genetically, I think it's important that you get it to make progress in weightlifting. Now, I know that Jared's a big sleeper too, so me and him used to sleep a lot if we roomed together at meets and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember that. Yeah, that's interesting. I was reading a book and I can't remember the name of it, but they were talking about that, like sleep opportunity, you know, being in bed with no distractions, no phones or anything like that. Like you're trying to actively go to sleep. Um, is that, it's good to have that 8 hours. Another thing that I got from, I read Arnold Schwarzenegger's book. And again, I'm having trouble remembering the name of that book, but he would say he'd only sleep like 4 hours, 4 or 5 hours of sleep a night. He would take naps, like small naps here and there, but then he would always be like, "No, you don't need to sleep. You need to get stuff done." Which, for some people, they could see that and think, "Oh, I only need this much sleep," and then they wonder why, their weightlifting is suffering so much. Well, it's because you're not Arnold Schwarzenegger. he might only need that much sleep.
Yeah, I work with a guy at work. I mean, he's not an athlete, but he is he has to perform and use his brain a lot. He's a really smart guy, a software engineer. And basically he has like short sleeper syndrome. I don't know if that's what it's called, but basically he only requires like 4 hours of sleep a night. And that's
Wow.
just and he feels completely rested and normal with that amount of sleep. And so like honestly, like he is up until like 3 in the morning every night, just doing stuff and working on things if he wants to, or relaxing, watching TV, whatever he wants to do. And then he sleeps for like 4 hours and he feels fine. And that's totally normal for him. And he doesn't feel drained. But like if I do that for like 3 nights, like I'm literally non-functional. Like
Mm-hmm.
I can't do that. I will say that I know some of your questions later are dealing with like life responsibility. And I think one of the things at Muscle Driver that we could do is if we went and traveled to a seminar or whatever and were just totally exhausted and came back home, I could just stay in bed like an entire day or two, like literally,
Mm-hmm.
and recover from that. I think the biggest thing that has changed for me now in that way is if I go coach at the Virus Series 2 that's coming up, for instance, right? And I come home, being home with two kids is exhausting for my wife as well. And so she kind of expects that when I come home, obviously I'm going to be on a little bit. And so I'm not able to lay in bed for 2 days to recover from this experience, right? And so, um, and over the long term, that is tough. That is tough. When you have kids, there's no days off. They need you, and
Mm-hmm.
and that's one of the day to day is not that much different in some ways. It's not, but the fact that when you don't feel good or you're sick or whatever it is, no matter if it's ideal for your training or not, to sleep that whole day, it's just not possible. It's
Mm-hmm.
not possible.
Yeah, that's definitely a factor there. Come in and start banging pots and pans or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a big thing. Yeah, I think we even had some of that. Yeah, we'll get to those questions a little bit more. So yeah, you do track your sleep. So the next thing kind of going in there is how much do you stretch?
I think there was a time when I was like pretty inflexible, and it's kind of silly looking back because CrossFit really brought all these realms together. And like, they brought like ROMWOD became a thing and people normalized stretching. But weightlifters literally used to argue on goheavy.com about if stretching was beneficial or not. And about 50% of people truly believe that stretching was bad for your weightlifting. All right. And I was like, had some pretty obvious like asymmetries that I could have benefited from stretching. But like when 50% of people are on one side and it's the easier side, you're just kind of like, well, I don't even know if this is
Mm,
beneficial. I'm not going to stretch. So, anyways, I got to the point where I finally realized that I needed to gain certain flexibility and range of motions and stretch really hard until I got those ranges of motions. And then since then, just kind of like a maintenance stretch every night that takes about 5 minutes.
yeah, yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I know so many people got confused by that study that said static stretching. I don't remember exactly what it was. Like if you static stretch, you lose some of your explosiveness. And it was only a short term thing. Like you don't static stretch right before you go do a
Yeah.
vertical jump, but and then people took that as, oh, that's going to take away from my explosiveness. That might have been why they said that, or maybe not. But I remember that being a big discussion back in the day.
Yeah. I mean, that's exactly why they said it. So, yeah, I think like most weightlifters didn't stretch in the early 2000s. And I came in like right at the end of that and just kind of like didn't stretch for 4 or 5 years when I really could have benefited from improving my positions at that point, right? But
Hmm. Yeah, there's some interesting things about stretching too. There's the increase of flexibility, but then there's also the just the act of stretching, and it's the releasing of the the different neurotransmitters and hormones that kind of help relax the muscle, that kind of give more benefits other than just increased flexibility. But yeah, I do think you can overdo it, but I think it's harder to overdo it than people think, especially if you're a weightlifter. And I think that's the other thing about weightlifters and why they get away with not stretching too is that you're forced into a bit of a deep end range motion just by the very nature of weightlifting. So
Yeah,
depending on your anthropometrics.
I think there's a concept in probably a lot of different sports, but in weightlifting, there's like this minimum threshold of certain things that you have to have. One of those is like plyometric ability. So if you have that minimum threshold of ability, you don't really benefit from getting further along. Or like maybe a bench press or something. Like I think it's like beneficial up to a point, but once you exceed that point, it's no longer beneficial. And I think with stretching, it's kind of the same thing. Like there's a point at which it's really good for you if you don't have that minimum threshold, and then once you exceed that, it's not really beneficial other than just like makes you feel good. Um, and I think I was probably at a point where I needed that. I was below the minimum threshold for a while and wasn't doing it. And I think a lot of these people who were like, spouting that you don't need to stretch were super flexible, right? And I think people who are really flexible, it's easy to say, "Oh, I never stretch. You don't need to stretch." It's just, because it's not something they struggle with. So,
Yeah, it's hard to put yourself in someone else's shoes, but it's a valuable skill if you can. Um, and then, so do you track your macronutrients?
yes, when I'm super serious about training and I need to make a weight class, I definitely do. I go through periods of time like if I'm really busy or weightlifting isn't my top priority, that I can certainly get off that, and that's one of my weaknesses. But I think probably when I cut to 73 and maintained it, leading into that process, and after I maintained it, probably for like 3 years, I tracked my macros every day without missing a day. But that would be by far the longest stretch that I've ever done that.
Yeah, that's some good consistency.
But that's what it required for me. Like if like I had to be super precise every single day, without missing days, because 73 for me is not natural. Even though like my body looks most correct probably at that weight class, like my body wants to sit at 88.5.
Mm-hmm.
Like always has, at least for since like 2010.
Yeah, that's they kind of got a weight that your body normalizes that.
Now, did you ever track macros, or do you now?
Nope, never did.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was always a little bit more instinctual, and I think I'm like one of those people that were flexible, and didn't have to stretch, but not in stretching. Apply that to macros.
Hmm.
I think I just had a general idea, and I just tracked my weight, and I tracked that really specifically and religiously, and same time every day, first thing when I woke up in the morning. And sometimes we would do other times of the day, but I would kind of make adjustments based on that. But they just weren't tracked
Yeah,
as specific as the macros.
I think before I started tracking macros and working with RP, like RP initially was more like a food template, which they basically broke up macros and put it in a template form and gave you like certain options, and then there was like ranges of calories and macros that you would get based on their template. So it was all mapped out in that way, but it wasn't tracking macros. It was just like eat 4 ounces of either chicken breast or 93% ground beef or whatever. So there might be a difference in calories there, but it's like built into the template. Um, but I think that I would be just kind of eat whatever, and then like basically I don't really have a hard time like not eating much. Like I can go like days where I'm only eating like a few protein shakes and I feel fine for a few days, right? So it's kind of like more extremes one way or the other. Which is like really in an ideal world, you want to be putting the same fuel into your body every day. So for me, eating on a template or tracking macros kind of helps me do that. Like my body's going to have a similar feel every day, and like the ups and downs are going to be less.
Yeah, and I think that was probably one of the things that helped me too is that I tended to eat the same thing every day. So when I made changes, it was very easy to make changes,
Hmm.
and to know where things were coming from. But yeah, the more specific that you can, I'm sure the more beneficial that it is. Better to have that full picture. Um, so do you train year round?
Yeah, I pretty much always have. Like, obviously there's ebbs and flows and the prioritization of weightlifting in your life, like we've talked about before. But I mean, I'm always going to the gym at least a couple times a week.
Yep. Yeah, that one, I feel like that one's pretty steady for me as well. Always trained year round. I feel like the outlier it'll be interesting to see some more of this data and to see who doesn't train year round. Because I know some other sports, they don't train year round. Um, but yeah, we'll see what everyone says about weightlifting. So going to the next question, did you have a traditional job? Did you work full time, part time, a desk job, or a physical job?
Yeah, I mean, of course I do now have a traditional job where I work 9 to 5. When we were at Muscle Driver, we didn't. Um, and I think like prior to that, I was coaching weightlifting and going to college. And so I had jobs that were conducive to allowing me to be in the gym almost all day. Um, I think that you can have a traditional job and do well in the sport, and I think that you can make world teams and do all those things. I think it is, but it has to be a job that allows that. Like I think for me, when I was in a warehouse job, I was like tanked, right? And my
Mm-hmm.
training was awful. I think in the short term, if you go through like small periods of time doing that kind of stuff, it can like help you in GPP type of way. But when you're long term in a warehouse, it is just a grind. Um, and so I basically work a job where I'm a software engineer. I have a desk treadmill that I can put my desk up, walk on the treadmill a little bit, so I'm not like totally sitting the whole day. Um, and obviously my garage is right below me, so there's no commutes. Can occasionally pop down and get my squats during lunch or something and train after work. Between there's no commute, so like if my wife's coming home and or picking up the kids or something, I can jump in the garage. You, I have intentionally tried to create a situation where even to this day I can still train, but obviously that's different than when you're a full-time weightlifter, you're sponsored.
Yep. And so when would you say you got that traditional job? Probably what, 2016, 2017? And then,
Yeah, 2017. So I went through so after 2016, like the Olympic trials and everything, like for all of us, we're kind of in limbo, right? And uh
mm-hmm.
and so I basically lost all my stipends and everything, and rightfully so. And so eventually I'm just like trying to figure, what am I going to do for money? Like I still want to train, but what am I going to do for money? So I basically just started studying software engineering for like 12 hours a day. And just that was my life. And then I would like go to the gym and then I would feel like crap.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually I got a job, right? And then my current job I got in 2018 and where I was living in Wilmington for a while. And then when COVID happened, it became fully remote. Um, but so that's why I had like a huge drop off in my training or performance at meets, right? Because I was basically studying my coding for like 12 hours a day or doing coding one way or the other, whether it was my job and studying afterwards. The total amount was literally like 12 hours a day. And I developed a migraine issue because I was on my computer for so much. And I started getting headaches like daily, which was pretty crazy. And it took me like 2 years to resolve that issue. So
Yeah.
I think like that's probably just like my personality to be extreme. And so that's what I did to try to get good at coding, and then it just kind of backfired.
Yeah. Yeah. I know, they've got some cool products out now, just like some special glasses that are made and designed for people who look at computers all day.
Yeah, like blue light glasses or something.
Yeah, no, they've gone even a little bit further. My wife got some because she has a job where she looks at a computer all day, but it actually has something to do with like training her eyes to not, if you're looking at a computer, you're only looking, 2 feet in front of you. Um,
Oh
and
yeah,
so
because you need depth. You need difference in depth all day. Yeah.
exactly. So I think these glasses, distort the vision so that it's less stress on her eyes, looking at a computer all day, so that I guess maybe eye strain. Some of those muscles that control the eyes aren't stretched out and on one side and then tight on the other. But yeah, that's they've been doing some cool stuff with that. I've never had that problem. I'm never in front of a computer that long. Uh, this next one, I know it's we know that we had sponsors and stipends through those 2016 Olympics. But with your sponsors, we got money from Muscle Driver and all that. But did you get any other sponsors that give you like money, products, or like any other different types of support?
Yeah. I mean, I've been blessed in that way. And a lot of people who gave products, and I had like another small sponsorship from a company called Redline at the time who sponsored Matt Frazier. So, but it was mostly around that time. Since then, I've had a couple of small things, like a shoe sponsorship, and people if they want to do giveaways or something. Sometimes they'll reach out and like Escape Audio. They said, "Hey, we'll give you a pair of headphones if you post on your Instagram that we'll give a giveaway," and that kind of thing is pretty cool. But really, even in making senior teams after Muscle Driver shut down, no major sponsorship, no stipends or anything like that ever again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was a pretty good setup there with Muscle Driver.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, you know what, I got some of those headphones too, and I just found them in a box not too long ago, and that was, I don't remember what year that was, 15 that we got those headphones.
Yeah, I actually got their new. They were running like a crazy sale on their new editions, but they're pretty good headphones. I like Escape Audio. I mean, they're for what they are, they're a good price as well.
Yeah, yeah, mine didn't work anymore. The batteries were shot,
Yeah.
but it's also been 10 years, so I don't know the normal lifespan of them. So do you take any multivitamins or vitamins or anything like that?
Yeah. Pretty much the things I take are like creatine, ZMA, multivitamin, vitamin C, vitamin D, and arginine. And those are like pretty much year round. And I take like a joint supplement, like glucosamine, MSM type stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I think like creatine is really the main one that like I will not skip. So,
So when you take creatine, how much do you take?
10 milligrams.
10.
Or
So
is it grams or milligrams for creatine?
I think it might be grams.
Yeah. Creatine dosage.
There is a 10 in
Yeah,
there.
yeah, 10 grams is what I think. They've actually been doing studies that are like high dosage creatine, like 25 to 30 grams of creatine a day now is considered okay. Like I was always told that was pretty bad. Like 10 milligrams was actually a high dose. Like when I was coming up in the sport, it was like you take 10 milligrams to load and then you back down to 5 for the long term. And
Mm-hmm.
then you want to cycle off creatine for certain parts of the year because your body will stop producing its or like yeah, I think like kind of like producing as much creatine on its own or like from its food sources. So I always kind of treat it that way, and I'm hesitant to try like 25 grams, even though that's what the new studies are saying. It just seems so foreign to me. But I do know a couple people who are swearing by it right now.
Yeah, I know when we were coming up, it was almost like moms against creatine. That was like the supplement that all the moms were like, "Oh, that's unhealthy. My baby can't be taking creatine."
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember those. But yeah, there's been some interesting things that I was trying out. I went up to 10 because they were saying that you get some mental clarity benefits when you get to that 10 milligrams and higher. And comparing to other products, I never could feel much of a difference with creatine personally, compared to like as far as mental stuff, compared to like Alpha Brain or Fast Brain or something like that, or some herbs like rhodiola or something. But yeah, they've been it's pretty definitive research that they're showing that it's getting some good benefits. Um, so do you get massages?
Uh, I used to get a lot more massages, but right now I don't. I do roll out on my own and stretch. So I kind of get some of that, but not the same. I just don't really have access to massages within a reasonable distance of me, and it can get a little pricey.
Yeah, and time. So when you were getting them, how often did you go?
Um, I don't know. Realistically, I probably, unless I was at the OTC where I just had access to like regular massages, I probably was getting one like once a month on average. But some of those would be might be more concentrated. I might do it like once a week for 2 months and then not get one for a month and a half. You know what I mean? So I wouldn't say it was ever a regular cadence. It was like I would introduce it, do it for a while, and then stop doing it for a while.
Yeah, nice. Um, Cold baths.
Yeah, I believe in cold plunges. I think they're beneficial. And there is some mixed science, I guess you would say, on cold plunges and if they're beneficial in the long term. But I think in the short term, they're definitely beneficial to reduce pain and inflammation for the next session when that session is important. I think in the long term, it's maybe not good to completely uh, try to inhibit inflammation all the time.
Yeah. So when you were doing cold baths, how often did you get them or do them?
Um, yeah, it depends. I mean, different periods of time. Again, I might introduce it. Leading into Pan Am Games was the most recent time that I did that, and I was doing it probably twice a week. So I would say that's fairly frequently given that I don't have it at my house. So I was able to go to that place training for Pan Am Games, and I think it really reduced the pain that I experienced in training because when I was cutting to 73 really on a calorie deficit, a lot of hard training, was dealing with not a knee injury, but knee pain. The cold baths were really therapeutic during that time, but I'm not sure that in the long term that like is the best, like I'm saying, because you want that inflammatory response sometimes. So
Mm-hmm.
I think it should be used when you need it in those periods of time, like short periods of time. If you have a really important session and you're really sore or you have some inflammation build up, it's good to get a cold plunge to prepare for that session. But I'm not sure that like regular cold plunges all the time is the move.
Nice. Yeah, I think most of the things that I did was at most once a week. But usually it was probably once a month, or if we had a big session, like you said, try to do it before
Hmm.
to get feeling good. Um, so for physical therapy or chiropractic, did you ever? I know we had a chiropractor once a week come into Muscle Driver.
Yeah. Again, through periods of time I have, just a lot of that just comes down to affording it and, uh, just realistically through a lot of periods of time after Muscle Driver, didn't have access to those kind of things. Um, I think those things can be extremely beneficial if it fits into your schedule and budget, though. I think more so PT if you're dealing with something. I think PT and chiropractic can go hand in hand. I think a lot of times, like chiropractors, I mean, we've had conversations about this. They can be really salesy. They're trying to get you come in regularly, but if you find a chiropractor that can adjust you and a PT that can assist you become more balanced so that you stay in alignment, that's a great thing. And if that's a chiropractor who's not like you need to come in once a week for the next 52 weeks,
Yep.
and you have to prepay for it.
Yep. They'll sell you. They're trying to make money. But yeah, yeah, those are some good points. And I think, maybe even some of that would be some really good data, for an up and coming weightlifter to know that, it's, it could be nice, but it's not going to be like make or break your performance.
Yeah, I think it's possible that if you need an adjustment, then and you get one, that's going to be helpful. But if you don't really need an adjustment and you're getting one, it's not going to have any benefit.
Mm-hmm. Yep. It'll feel good in the moment. Maybe that's it. Um, so working with any sports psychologist or, mental stuff, um, did you work with anyone like that?
Yeah, I did work with a guy named Ken Baum. He wrote a book called Mental Edge. He worked with Jessica Lucero when she was working with Amy Anaya, and she sort of had a breakthrough. Um, so I did work with him. I think he is talented. Um, and he does like a lot of, he tries to get you in this meditative state and then talks you through visualization. Um, I think it was beneficial for me, but I don't really feel like that was a weakness for me. I've always, for better or worse, like viewed myself as being like I feel like I have the ability to view myself in an honest way. Like maybe I'm not as good as person X, and I can admit that right now. But if that person can get to a certain level, I don't see why I can't. You know what I mean? Like I don't
Mm-hmm.
see like what's different about they're just a person. And I mean even today, like you see these kids doing great things. It's like yes, uh, there's some reason why they're, and I refuse to accept just like, oh, they're more genetically talented. I do think that genetics plays a great role, but when you're an athlete, you can't just think that way. You can't think they're just more genetically talented than me and accept that. You have to be like, there is a way, and I will figure it out, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I just haven't yet, you know?
Yep.
and and just keep experimenting and trying new things and being persistent. And so I don't really feel like that was a weakness for me. So while I feel like it was beneficial, I don't feel like it was the thing that made like open new doors for me personally. Because a lot of times they'll ask leading questions and they'll be like, "What's something you're struggling with?" And I'll be like, "I'm not really struggling with anything right now," or like, "What is you know, as long as I'm getting enough sleep." I think one thing that was interesting is counting negative thoughts when I was on a full night's sleep versus not a full night's sleep. And I was getting like 4 times the amount of negative thoughts when I didn't sleep enough.
Yeah, that's interesting. So you kind of worked with him for like a one period of time, and then you kind of took some of the things and kind of used them, but it wasn't a regular basis where you were constantly working with someone.
Uh, on and off, I still have contact with him, and he's made me recordings over the years that I have access to, and I can like their visualization recordings so that of those sessions, so I can reference those even today, even if I'm not. But
Interesting.
but he will talk to me. Yeah. I mean, like I said, I think that sports psychology is really important. I think that I naturally think a certain way that they try to get you to think. And so it was like one of those things that came more natural.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, I always enjoyed visualization. I took a sports psychology class in college, um, my senior year actually, and I did a practice where I was visualizing winning a national championship, and I kind of wrote it down. I wonder if I can still find that, but yeah, it was interesting. Yeah, and it was useful.
Yeah, one of the things that was cool is he would have me create a drive statement, like what were the things that are important in my life. And, it might be like God, family, friends, weightlifting, and everybody's going to have a different strategy. And we create this driver statement like, I, you know, I am Travis Cooper. I am, I every time before nationals, before I won, I would write that I was like, oh, I'm national champion, 2-time nationals, 3-time national champion. Almost every national championship I won, I was writing this paragraph several weeks before the meet, saying like, and it doesn't always work out. Like I'll be like, oh, I go 6 for 6 and hit these numbers, but I didn't always do that in as much detail. But it was priming my mind for success, and I've never. A lot of people when they visualize and it doesn't happen the way like they're like, oh, I'm gonna open at 142 and make it, and then I'm gonna go to 147. If it doesn't work out that way, it like freaks them out because they're not within their visualization anymore and they haven't experienced it. But like I've always been good at adapting. Like if I miss my opener, like I always feel like I'm gonna make it, even if it's on the third attempt. I don't like lose faith, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good trait. I I remember watching you at the warm-up platforms of the 2016 Olympic trials, which for us was the meet that would qualify us for the real Olympic trials for the Pan Ams.
Yeah.
But your snatch warm-up, oh, it was rough. You were missing a lot of reps.
Yeah, that's unusual. I rarely miss reps in warm-ups, and if I do, it's usually like the last one. But yeah, I think I missed everything above 110. I think I missed 120, 130, 135. I think I opened at 140 and made it.
Mm-hmm.
But
That was cool to see.
that was a
I was happy to see that when I was back there. I remember I was watching.
that was a hard cut. I remember, like we had sort of lost our funding and a lot of stuff happened. I think like we were competing so often. I think I had gotten up to like 82 kilos, and so I cut from 82 water cut to 77. It was a tough cut. I remember between weigh-ins, my mom didn't always travel to the meets anymore, but she traveled. Like, it was an unusual experience between weigh-ins because it was such a hard cut. Like I couldn't eat. I was like crying in my mom's lap. I'm like 20, 28 years old, like crying in my mom's lap. Like she's like, "What the fuck's going on?" But like, uh, but yeah, seriously. And then I was missing that. But the crowd was electric. That was the height of weightlifting fandom. And when you walked out to
Mm-hmm.
that platform, it was different. So
Yeah,
you had to make it because people were watching.
yeah, yeah. So you definitely you came in clutch on that meet. That was fun.
Now, did you work with a sports psychologist ever?
Uh, so I took that course in college, and I never actually worked with a sports psychologist. I have a really good friend who um, does sports psychology, Nathan Hansen, and maybe indirectly just like talking to him or things like that. But I've never you know formally done work with a sports psychologist.
Yeah. Yeah, I
I
worked I
think
worked with a couple, and I think Ken was the one that I connected with the most.
Yeah, I think there's definitely some value, and it's gonna, like you said, it's gonna vary per person. And I think maybe you and I kind of had that in common, where we could look at situations logically, and there'd be times like the Don McCauley story where I kind of flew off the handle a little bit here and there, but for the most part, I could look at things logically and kind of understand
Hmm.
what's going on, and you know do things in my control and be able to ignore things that are outside of my control.
Hmm.
Um, so, do you ever have any major injuries?
No, thankfully I haven't. I mean, in terms of surgery, um, I did have about 6 weeks before Pan Am Games. I was walking a lot to get to 73, and I was like throwing a horseshoe because I walked down to the beach. I live near the water, and so our neighborhood has like it's not like the ocean like you would think of, but it's kind of like there is water at the bottom of the hill. And so we have like some horseshoe sets, and so I was like throwing a horseshoe, and then I like tweaked my knee. And I don't know if it was like a minor meniscus thing or what, but that lasted for like 2 years, and it didn't really affect me while I was lifting, but it affected me tremendously in everyday life. So I've had stuff like that. Um, Mostly things that I could train through, that didn't keep me out of the competitions, and never anything that required surgery, thankfully. And I understand that any single lift it can be the one that, makes that happen, right? So I've just been a little lucky and a little smart in some places. A lot lucky when I was training 7 days a week, I would say.
Yeah. Yeah. Nice.
What about you, aside from your nerve damage, which is obviously, I mean, that kind of keeps you from competing now, but is that the only thing that you really dealt with?
Yeah, I'd say that was the major one. Um, was the nerve damage on my axillary nerve, which I believe innervates the teres minor and maybe like the posterior delt. Um, and that happened, and like I couldn't even hold my arm up. It wasn't painful. I just couldn't use
Yeah.
my arm, and I still trained through that. I just didn't do snatches or clean and jerks. Um, but then, kind of over the years after that, it kind of progressed into, you know, just other things. Like I had like a neck issue, like, and that's kind of what my issue is now. Anytime I get into that front rack, it just puts compression on nerves. They're both on the same side, and I don't think that they are directly related to each other. There's probably some indirect relationship with those injuries, but yeah, that was probably the main one that kind of took me kind of out of weightlifting.
There was one. I tweaked my shoulder at the OTC a little bit when I was younger, and then there was one where every time I would catch a clean, it was like my rhomboid would go numb or
Mm-hmm.
something. I don't know. I mean, that could have been like a disc issue thing. It just sort of worked itself out, and I trained smart through it over it. But it took time. I mean, it took months and months for that to go away. So I think like when you feel pain, just like allowing the necessary time, like train through it to a certain extent, but like in a smart way. Like once you feel that pain, walk away. So don't stop training, but at the same time, don't force yourself to train for a competition when you shouldn't be.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Knowing your body, knowing when to listen to it and when to push, how to walk that line in between progress and injury. I think that was something that Chad Vaughn had mentioned that kind of always stuck with me. Um, so, did you train alone or with training partners? Kind of.
Yeah, obviously we had an electric atmosphere for a couple years there. Um, and prior to that, I was training some athletes that were pretty good. Some of them I coached, some of them were training partners, and we had a pretty good crew. Um, so I would say only later in my career did I train alone. So right now I'm training alone primarily, but I still do have the opportunity to go and train with some good people once a week, once every couple weeks, and keep in touch with them. I would say there's pros and cons to both. I think it's better to have training partners. I think it's not always as good to be pitted in competition against people because uh, I think sometimes you might neglect a technical issue for too long, which in the short term you get a better result, but in the long term you kind of hindered yourself or ingrained a pattern that was bad, right?
Yeah, that's a good point.
When I'm training alone, I can do a lot of reps at 80 to 100 kilos and nobody's watching. I don't have to impress anybody. You know what I mean? So, but also it's hard to train when you don't feel good when you're alone.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And so, of course, I know this. We kind of hinted at this question earlier in the conversation, but are you married? Which is an obvious yes. And then you have children and dependents. And I guess, did you have those kids in the middle of the competitive years, and how did that affect you?
Yeah. So I am married. I got married at an older age though. I mean, I was in my 30s before I got married. Although we had dated for a long time and essentially, for all intents and purposes, were married for a while, as far as lifestyle. Um, I think I do have two kids now, and I didn't have those kids when we were at Muscle Driver like you did, so you probably had quite a bit of a different experience during that. You were a little further along in certain areas of your life, like you were already married, whereas I didn't get married till
Mm-hmm.
way after that time. So, if I was already married, maybe I would have had kids too, right? Um, I think that it can be done with kids. I think it adds complexity. So, like everything that you add to your life adds complexity and a piece of the puzzle that you have to fit weightlifting around. And obviously, in priority, your kids, you got to eat. You got to have a good relationship with your wife. Like all these things are technically always going to be above weightlifting. So those things have to be in order. So if any of those become chaotic, then your weightlifting training is going to be chaotic because it's further down.
Mm-hmm.
At least it probably should be. So I think, yeah, I mean, there will be times where that can take away from training, and there will be times where it enhances your ability to train if you're being supported. So that's a tricky one. I think that there's always things like if you want to live a fulfilled life, I think that for me, that included getting married and having kids. That may not be the case for everybody, but for me, that was certainly on the list of things that when I'm 70 and I look back, I want to have kids. At that point, maybe my parents aren't here anymore. None of my friends really give a shit about me. Who's going to be there really like your kids? And so I felt like it was important that I have that in my life. And I did put off having kids for a long time, but then it was like, all right, it's time. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Well, if I'm around when I'm 70, Travis, I give a shit about you. But yeah, no, I know exactly what you mean. Yeah, I like how you've referenced the idea of, things of importance in your life, um, and living a fulfilling life. You know, sometimes when you're young and you're in that idea where they did this study where the Olympians would give away 10 years of their life, to win a gold medal at the Olympics. Um, that is something that, young people, they're just wired that way to think. I was kind of in that, I never had that mentality. I always thought in my mind, it was like, no, that's like 10 years. Like, imagine what you can see your grandkids doing during those 10 years. Like, that
Yeah.
would be crazy.
I don't
Um,
I don't think I ever thought of it directly that way. However, I mean, I was willing to train as hard as like doing the 15 training sessions a day or something like that we did, like the mini sessions. Obviously, you can't train 30 hours a day, so they're like these quick spurts of aggression and weightlifting with 30-minute rest between. So we tried that. And I mean, I always kind of like accepted like your body's either going to adapt or die. And at that point in time, like I was willing to try that, understanding that there was a potential risk involved. You know, not that I like wanted to die or like take years off my life, but I would be like, hey, if this is what it takes, like this is what it takes. And in hindsight, I'm not really sure that was ideal or necessary to try. Although I think me and Mike kind of had some benefits from it, and maybe you didn't have any. Um, but yeah, I wouldn't intentionally take it, and I don't think that way anymore. Like I wouldn't trade. I want to not feel like total dog crap in my regular life, even though occasionally you are when you're in a training cycle for weightlifting. But like, it's really hard to be present when you're super fatigued with your kids.
mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yep. Yeah. And I never even thought of that 15 sessions a day directly as taking years away from my life or anything like that. I always thought of that question as more of like a magical trade,
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
yeah, and not so much as the realistic, like, aspect of, training, taking the stress on your body. But yeah, I guess it depends on how you look at that too.
I mean, I
Uh,
definitely we obviously both really wanted to make the Olympics, and it was a big thing that we were training for. But the truth is like a lot of people who make it are like they still go through the same depression after the competition which is natural. It's not like something's wrong with them. It's just a big letdown. Like you go through this
Mm-hmm.
big life experience and then there's like a letdown, and it may not even present itself as like sadness, but it's just like what's the next thing? Like was that all? Like it's over? Like what am I doing here? Um, and it's tough. And then like 10 years after the fact, it doesn't really affect your life in any major way. I mean, you get some occasionally you get invited to something or you're recognized as an Olympian when if you don't make it, you can never be recognized as an Olympian, but it doesn't like materially, I don't believe it would have materially changed my life if I made the Olympics versus not.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree with that. Being further away from it at this point. But yeah, you definitely feel those ideas of, like, what am I doing? Kind of after the fact. It's an interesting thing, you know, kind of gaining control of your life again after when you've invested so much of yourself um, into one goal. But what's where I think it is valuable to, not invest your identity into weightlifting or not invest your identity solely as a weightlifter. Having your identity as, you know, outside of that, I think is valuable.
Yeah. And that's not meant to be completely negative by what I said. It's like, whether you make it or not make it, I mean, I think it's worth trying. I think it was a great experience and it was fun. I mean, all that stuff, like, I still am trying to do as well as I can. Um, I think that is worth pursuing and spending time and like doing things that are hard and working hard. But I think like, yeah, your perception does change where it's not all about like, oh, I have to make this specific world team or Pan Am team or Olympic team or whatever. It's just like you just have a different why.
Yeah, I think I wrote a fiction book by Brandon Sanderson, and one of his main themes in there, which is funny, is journey before destination. Like the journey is where it's at. And then when I look back on my weightlifting, that's what I remember. I remember the relationships. I remember training in the gym with you. I remember all that. And those are the positive experiences that I have. And I did have some good destinations, along the
Yeah.
way.
I mean, you got to travel the world. You did.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, essentially, uh, me and you went to the world championships multiple times, traveled the world. Like, short of being named Olympians, we did everything that an Olympian does, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we trained at the Olympic Training Center. We were had sponsorships. They weren't like crazy money, but it was enough to live on.
Yeah.
Given that rent in Charlotte was $400 a month at that time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. They were the best at the time. Those, what we had,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think. So there, we just went into the kids, and then we kind of talked about this. This next question's about like weight classes and like what weight classes were you in, and you kind of had an interesting spread.
yeah. I've been in a variety of different weight classes for different reasons. Some of it was the best opportunity to win nationals, and like for instance, was a 77 when I first started weightlifting. I was a light 77. Then basically I trained for several years and eventually was given the opportunity to be a resident at the OTC, but they already had a 77 named Henry Woodard that Steve Fowler coached, who's Olivia Reeves' coach now, and he was better than me. So they said, "We want you to be a resident. You work really hard and you're adapting to this training better than other people, but you have to lift as an 85 because we can't give you a 77 kilo spot because Henry's already here." And I said, okay, whatever. So I became an 85 for like several years. And then eventually uh, came back to 77. And originally it wasn't really my intent to come back. It was just started working with the nutritionist, was trying to improve my body composition and just got to like 82 kilos and was maintaining my total. So I just kind of kept going. And then after the quad, like you had CJ and Harrison They were both like young phenoms, basically unbeatable. And before they changed the weight classes, CJ was a 69, Harrison had moved up to 85, so 77 was going to fit me. And I felt like this can be my class. Like it's like a dogfight. There's no outlier here. There's some other really good lifters, but I felt like I was going to come out on top in that weight class, and the other two phenoms were going to split. Ended out, they changed weight classes, and they went, 73, 81. So that allowed CJ to grow into 73. Harrison didn't have to go all the way to 85. He could go to 81. And then I'm like, I mean, I can't go whatever's below 73, 67. I mean, I guess it's theoretically possible, but that would have been crazy. And
Mm-hmm.
so I was like, I guess I'll go 89 and try to win nationals. And I did one time, but like that's not really the weight class that best suits me for performance. Um, and then the Olympic weight class last time was 73. So it's really an attempt to find a weight class. I think like over time, I think like traditionally, it's like you move up a weight class to get stronger. But I think like as you age, maybe your natural muscle mass decreases slightly, regardless of how much you're training or whatever. So I think honestly, like if you get as lean as possible when you're older, you're probably going to be lighter. I mean, assuming that you're drug free and all that, right? Like you're going to maintain less muscle mass probably. So I don't think that I was able to make 73 when I was at Muscle Driver because when I look at my bod pod results, I had more lean body mass.
Mm-hmm.
And then like as I got older, I was able to make 73 when I got lean because I had slightly less. I mean, we're talking like little differences, but
Yeah, yeah, that's an interesting perspective about age and muscle mass. Yeah, so that's a 16 kilo spread of where you were competitive in weightlifting. That's kind of interesting.
yeah. But I think for my body weight naturally sits at 88.5 if I just like am normal. And it can certainly go above that. I can have an appetite. I don't get full. But also if I'm dieting, like I don't get super hungry either. So I
Mm,
I just am someone who can adapt to different situations. Like if I'm cutting, I can cut really well. If I'm not watching what I'm eating, I can eat a whole large pizza and not be full. So
mm-hmm.
very very adaptable in that way. Um, but I think like if I'm just naturally eating, I'm about 88, and so I think I should be a lot leaner because that's probably about 17 to 20% body fat at that weight. And obviously, if you want to be optimized, you want to be about 8 to 10%, I would say. And so when I cut down, I'm maintaining my lean body mass, pretty much all of it, but it's hard. Like I
Mm-hmm.
really genuinely have to track everything and walk like 10 to 12,000 steps a day, and it's very time consuming. So,
Yeah, on top of training,
yeah,
10,000 steps is a lot.
yeah,
I guess that's the recommendation for general life, but it catches up quick when you're weightlifting.
yeah. I think you were just in 77, 85, right? Like your whole career.
Yeah, I think I did an 89 there at the end.
Okay, yeah, when they changed weight classes.
Yeah, but I probably weighed in close to 85.
Yeah, yeah, there
Um,
just wasn't any. Yeah, it's like 81's too far to go. 89's not really natural, but it's the only weight class.
exactly. Yeah, I think even now I'm probably right around that 88, just naturally right now. That's kind of where my body likes to sit. So that was the most of my questions. The last question, if it was anyone else, I probably wouldn't ask this on a podcast. But is it would remain completely anonymous to anybody that asks. I just want to get some data for people, and some people might not even answer this question, but so that people know, because everybody knows there is drug use in sport, there is drug use in USA weightlifting. But the question would be, have you ever taken any PEDs?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't. I've only taken the supplements primarily that we discussed earlier. I mean, I started getting drug tested when I was 17, and the sport was like very taboo. Like drugs were just like it was so obvious when someone got on drugs, and every single person would be talking and gossiping about that person and being like, they're definitely on drugs, they need to get drug tested. So it was just always like my perception, at least this maybe I'm living under a rock, right? But my perception, at least, of during that time in weightlifting is that I don't know, 95% or more of those people were literally drug free in
Mm-hmm.
the US, And it was different in other countries. And that's the USA weightlifting that I grew up in. Um, and I think like the sport's grown a lot, and I still don't think it's like extremely widespread nationally. I think it does happen much more than it did when I first started, or between like the years of say 2005 and 2015 that I can speak on uh, more as an insider.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the large majority of world team members are drug free.
Yeah, and that's always an interesting topic, especially when someone kind of comes out and like tells you their story, and they're just transparent after the fact. Like Pat Mendez in his book, the sport of steroids. Jim Rutter
Hmm.
wrote it, where he just kind of goes over kind of all that stuff, and it's interesting um, looking at it from after the fact. And then the same thing that Ian did after he got popped.
Yeah.
You know.
And I mean, I think that like in Pat's case, it was super obvious to a certain extent, right? Like we were all like 95 to 100% sure that he was on drugs. And then, John was like obviously he's not going to come out and say his lifter's on drugs. So,
Yep.
but I did try to train like that because I was like, well, if he's not, and this is how you get good, like, then whatever, I'll train 7 days a week. And, thankfully I didn't get hurt, and it kind of came out that, eventually that 100% confirmed that he was doing certain things. So, but that's always how it was. Like, I think like 95% of people or more were drug free. And then you would have like Pat Mendez snatching 200 in training, and it would be so obvious because his performance jumps so ridiculous compared to everybody else's that it's not the same. He's not doing the
Mm-hmm.
same thing as we are. And it's a tricky subject because I think that we used to use it as a crutch a little bit, because it was known that all these different lifters internationally were using steroids. Um, so it kind of inhibited your imagination, at least for me, because I was in the sport for much longer than you. I think maybe you had more of an open mind of what's possible, but I'd always be like, this guy is snatching 170 and clean jerking 210, and I know for a fact that he's using because they came to the OTC and told us about it. You know what I mean? And so
Yep.
like that became a ceiling for me, right? Like if that guy's doing that, like what can I expect to get within 10% of that, maybe slightly better, and essentially that's that's what I ended up getting to. Um, but yeah, I think like it is possible to do really big lifts drug free. And I also think that we don't really know the limits of that, because if you take a lifter like Ilya, and it's like an unknown, you know, or like Lasha, for instance, like he got popped when he was 15 years old or something like that, or Tatiana got popped when she was 15 years old, and they're considered the best. And there's a certain group of people that are like, well, if they weren't on steroids, they would still be the best. And then there's a certain group of people that are like, they wouldn't do anywhere close to those numbers, and we'll just never know. I think if somehow you could literally have everyone be drug free, that would be the most interesting for me. It just will never happen. Like I think it would be if drug testing was so, it's like blowing in a breathalyzer every morning to start your car or something.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you had to do that, I mean, nobody would ever do that. But in this utopian society, that's what I would imagine, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because then, yeah, there's just so many reasons why that wouldn't work. But yeah, it's interesting to theorize about it.
Yeah, that would be my utopian society, which would never necessarily be effective or economical, or people wouldn't actually do it. But just like in this theoretical, imaginary place, if everyone got drug tested daily and the drug test was actually effective in catching people, then everyone would be drug free. And you could truly find what the best training methodology was, what is possible drug free by the best genetic freak, and figure out all those answers that we'll never know because that it's just not the case.
Yep. Yeah, and then of course I lifetime drug free too. Um, I never liked the idea of dying young from liver failure.
That is true. A lot of the weightlifters, and it's not always from PEDs, probably. A lot of like the old school weightlifters were big smokers and they drank like crazy on top of like they would just be force fed PEDs that were not just like studies. It's just like, oh, this is supposedly
Mm-hmm.
the latest and greatest thing. But so, yeah, I mean, I think there's probably ways that if they did study things over the long term, it could be done in a healthy manner. But the way it's actually been done in elite sport is extremely dangerous from like, poorer countries or something. They're not taking
Mm-hmm.
fancy drugs, or, they might be taking like animal steroids or like just stuff that is extremely toxic to your liver.
Yeah.
Um, so it's interesting. But
Yep.
anyways,
But
man,
yeah, those were all my questions. And we'll see if I end up doing some more interviews like this and get some data together. I don't know how long this project will go on. But yeah, thanks for working through it with me on the first one.
yeah, yeah. And I know it was like 2.5 hours, so I appreciate you coming on and spending that time. And maybe we can do another podcast in a couple months or something. Trying to do one of these like I've been doing them once a week for a little while, but hopefully once every couple weeks for the foreseeable future. Not all of them are this long, of course, but we try to keep them about an hour most of the time.
Yep.
Um, where can people find you?
Um, I guess Instagram or Facebook, James Tatum, or on Instagram it's James Tatum USA. That would probably be the easiest way. I've got the website houseofweightlifting.com. Yeah, I've got some coaching on there. We've got a camp coming up at Wilmington Weightlifting Club with Walt, September 19th and 21st. We're going to have a 3-day in that camp, so that'll be fun. But yeah, that's what we're doing now. This works out pretty good because we're staying up late. As I was actually at the ER last night with my son, and we stayed up about this late, so my circadian rhythm is kind of right on track with this. He fell off his bike right on his face.
Mm. Well, I hope everything's okay. Obviously, he's okay, or you wouldn't be on this podcast right now. But
Yeah, he's all good, just banged up.
yeah, yeah, fair enough. Well, yeah. For those of you out there, I'm Travis Cooper. You can find me at Travis Cooper 77kg and just message me. Let me know if there's any topics, questions you would like to see on the podcast or guests. Um, Hopefully, you guys enjoyed this episode, and hopefully, we'll be back with one soon. Thanks. Have a good night.